Chapter. We're talking real money.
My goodness, time flies when we're having fun, doesn't it? Or time flies as we get older, which I think is what's happening. It's that time compression thing, contraction. But you know what it points out? The fact that every Friday seems to be like a day apart. It points out the importance of getting our acts together as we get older so that we can worry less about money as our ability to worry about it declines and our ability to make it declines. So that's why this show, this podcast is so blasted important. And every Friday, my goal is to try to answer as many of your questions as I can get in within a reasonable period of time, usually about 5 questions. I think that we have 5 or 6 today. And you send those in by going to talkingrealmoney.com and then clicking the Contact Us button and then speaking them. And by the way, they do sound really good if you speak them into an iPhone. iPhones just have great mics now, the newer ones. So do that. Or you can call and actually have a conversation with us on Saturdays. And that's when we do our show in Seattle. And that number is 855-935-TALK, 855-935-8255. So every Saturday, 3 to 5 Eastern, you can call and talk with us on the radio. Or you can just go to talkingrealmoney.com and send in your questions, and I'll try to answer them just like I'm going to do right now.
Tom and Don, thanks so much for your show. I'll send a little love to Don with this recorded question on my iPhone, so hopefully the speaker quality is great. But thanks for bringing peace to my life and investing and help me understand and avoid landmines. Really grateful for that. So this question is about my grandfather, who has since passed away. He had a modest sum that my mom wanted to get invested before he died. And they went to a local financial advisor that we know personally. And the advisor wanted to put it into an annuity. I really struggled because that would have skimmed about 30 grand off my grandfather's life savings. He didn't even need regular income. He had a government pension through the military that was paying for all of his expenses. And so for a number of years, I've just struggled in my own mind with this advisor who I knew personally. And I'm trying to get peace, I guess, with that. And so my question is, are financial advisors kind of like the car industry? You've got car salesmen that are really honest, give you a good deal. You've got the kind of the middle of the road, which is probably the larger portion that they're making a commission, they're making money, but they're not necessarily dishonest. They just don't know any better. And then of course you've got the sleazy car salesmen that you stay away from. So are most financial advisors in that middle group where it's part of the system that they know and work in, and they're not necessarily trying to rip people off, but it's just it's part of the business. I don't think that financial advisor was sleazy, but it seemed like it really would have not been a good idea for my grandfather. So hope that question makes sense. I'm trying to get some peace, and thanks again for all you do.
Wow. Not only does your call sound good, but your analogy is dead on. It's just such a great analogy. Because remember, most of the financial services industry jobs, the client-facing jobs, are sales jobs. And how do I know that? Personal experience. Tell you a little story. I've said it before, but not everybody listens to every podcast. When I was a young man in my 20s, I had no experience whatsoever in the financial services industry, no education in that industry, nothing whatsoever. However, I was an exceptional salesperson. I was very good at it. I made a living in commission sales. I made a living. Heck, when I was 18 years old, I was the top salesman for Time Life books on the phone, selling book subscriptions. I sold maintenance at a Volkswagen Subaru dealer. I sold appliances at JCPenney, not appliances, electronics, back when they had an electronics department. And I got a job working for one of the biggest financial services firms in the world as a financial advisor at the age of was I? 28? With absolutely no experience. And the only reason I got hired is because I was an exceptionally good salesperson. It's a sales job. And, when I was 20, my excuse is I was 28. I didn't know any better. I was doing what I was told to do and making a living. So, yeah, I would have definitely fallen in that middle ground where I didn't mean to do anything evil, but I was doing it anyway. I was selling people products with 8.5% commissions, for heaven's sake. And what's really interesting is that there was a study done 10 years ago by MarketWatch, I believe. It was MarketWatch. And they looked at all of the folks registered to sell financial products in the country. Stockbrokers, registered investment advisors, insurance people who sold investment products. They came up with a number of about 1 million people who were in the business of selling, or a million organizations, I think it was. But again, I don't know the exact number. But they looked through them and tried to determine which ones were always required to act in your best interests. In other words, the ones that were only registered investment advisors with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Those are the only ones. If they're registered both as a stockbroker or a registered rep with FINRA and with the SEC, then they're not always required to act as a fiduciary. If they have an insurance license to sell insurance products, then they're not always required to act as a fiduciary. Your advisor falls in that group of those who aren't. The vast majority. 99%, they said, are not always required to act as a fiduciary. So you talk to 100 different financial advisors, and the odds are that only one is going to be doing or trying to do what's always right for you. Otherwise, they're trying to make a living on commissions. And who can blame them for not doing what is best for the client? Because doing what is best for the client, by definition, means selling the cheapest products that are of the exact same quality as others. If you had two S&P 500 funds, for example, and one had a 1% expense ratio and paid you a commission, and the other one had a 0.1% expense ratio and paid you zero commission, as a fiduciary, your obligation is to put your client into the 0.1% fund, even though you don't make any money. So you're dead on. This is the vast majority of the financial services industry. And this is why you cannot have an affinity for your advisor. Yes, you can like them because they're very nice people almost always. But rarely, if ever, should you enter into a relationship with an advisor because of an affinity, because you go to church with them, because they're part of your club, because they're a family member, because they're a good friend. No, because the vast majority of those with whom you deal are going to be conflicted. So you're right. You nailed it. And this is a person probably, given what you told me about the annuity for the older relative with the big commission, this is someone with whom you don't want to do business. Thanks for your question. It was great. Now let's do the next one.
Hi, Tom and Don. My name is Dustin from Pennsylvania. I wanted to know how bond index funds are constructed. For example, the total bond market index. I know that stock index funds are weighted by the market capitalization of the companies in that index, but how are bond index funds created and weighted? I ask because my 401k really only has one true bond fund in it, and that's the Dodge & Cox Income Fund. And it's mostly a long-term bond fund that's actively managed. So I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that, too, if you have a minute. Thanks. Bye-bye.
That's a great question. I don't think it's ever been asked, but it's exactly the same as the weighting of a stock index. It's based on the total market value of the bonds. So that's why if you look at a fund like BND, the total bond index ETF from Vanguard, you'll see that the top holdings are all U.S. Treasury securities. 51% of the portfolio is Treasury securities because they are of the most value. So they take up all the top positions. I don't even gosh, it's going to be way down the list before you get into the first corporate bonds, and those are going to be for the biggest corporations with the most debt. So you'd think, well, wait, the most debt, that's not good. I don't want companies with the most debt. Well, actually, you kind of do, because it's in part dependent upon the market size of the company. But remember that because it is the value of the bonds in the secondary market is determined by investors' faith in that company. They're going to assign a higher value to a company that is of better credit quality. It's self-adjusting, but the majority of any total bond index is going to be U.S. governments because they take up the lion's share. But it is market value weighted. Thanks for your question. And remember, you can call us on Saturdays with questions at 855-935-TALK between 3 and 5 Eastern, or you can send them in at talkingrealmoney.com.
Hi, Tom and Don. Hey, I am a federal employee, or I was. I am now retired, and I currently have federal employee health benefits. I'm 64 years old. We soon will be eligible, both my wife and I, for Medicare. And considering not taking Part B, since we have the benefits we've had for the last 38 years, or, is taking the Part B worth the money in doing that in addition to or instead of our federal employee health benefits? Hope this is a topic that you're willing to talk about, and appreciate your help. Thank you.
They're all topics I want to talk about. So, yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, this is a topic that comes up regularly in my family. I am past 65 now. I don't feel like it, but I guess I am. And we did not take Part B because I have a very good private plan with my company. It's an excellent private plan. It's not cheap to me, but it's good. It's really, really good. Medicare is very good. So it's a tough call. And I have sat down, usually on a yearly basis, and kind of crunched the numbers. What would Medicare Part, and I just look at regular Medicare. I do not look at Medicare Advantage. I'm not a big Medicare Advantage fan because there's a disincentive for good health. There's an incentive to cut your health care as much as possible, like there is with private insurance. But anyway, what I sit down and do is look at a rough estimate of what my Medicare Part B premium would be with IRMA. What my compared deductibles. I also look at getting what a Medigap would cost for me where I live, what a Part D would cost where I live, and run those numbers, and then take into account some of the changes that might need to be made in our lives. We may have to change doctors and things just because of some of the practices we deal with. So we've run them, and I got to tell you, it is so close to a wash. It's sort of if it's not broke, don't fix it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. But yeah, look at it. Look at the numbers once you're eligible. But the good news is, as long as you have another plan, you can delay taking Part B without any penalties. So there's that. Thanks for the question. Let's do another.
Hey, Tom and Don. It's Paul in Dallas. Don sounded pretty desperate for some questions, so I thought I'd throw a weird one at you. I just passed the CFP exam in March as a career changer, and I'm now looking to make that career change. And so I'm curious, when I'm looking at firms' ADVs as a potential employee, new advisor, what sorts of things should I be looking at there? Curious to hear what you have to say. Thanks for your help.
Oh, this is a great question. Ooh, I love this one. There's a lot to unpack here. I really like this because I would imagine that there are several people like you who are looking to make a career change, want to get into the financial services industry. And I am hoping that you, as a listener, of course, do not want to become a product peddler like we discussed earlier. You want to provide a high quality of service as unconflicted as possible that is best for your clients. Since you took the CFP, you're pretty much required to do that, but that's not always the case. Anyway, so let's go to the Form ADV. It's pretty simple. There are a few things you want to look at. One, you want to look at the fee structure. While a higher fee structure is going to mean more money in your pocket, it means less money in your client's pocket. Now, of course, we have to balance the needs of the firm to make a living and you to make a living against the fact that it's the client's money. You got to make a living for the work you do. It's not easy work. It is a tough job. It's a great job. It's a rewarding job if you do it right. It's not if you do it wrong. So what you want to look at is the fee structure. That's usually, I think, in like section 4 or something. Oh, one thing you want to look for is a short ADV. You don't want a 250-page ADV. If you do, this is a firm that is bound to have all kinds of conflicts of interest. But that's the other thing you look for. Pull it up on your computer. Go to your search bar and type in conflict. And go through the document and look for their conflicts of interest. If you find that they are registered as brokers with FINRA, that's a red flag. If you find that many of their advisors are registered as insurance agents, that's a giant red flag. Look for their conflicts of interest. And then the other thing you want to look at, which is a little bit more nebulous, and this mainly applies, it applies to everybody who's looking at an ADV. Look at how they invest. What do they believe in? Do they trade and time the market? Do they do research on stocks, trying to pick the best ones? Those are firms you want to avoid because, in our opinion, based on lots of academic research, tons of empirical evidence, beating the market is not something firms can do. And by the way, they tend to charge more if that's what they're trying to do too. So you want a firm that starts out at no more than 1.25% per year, and that's at the high end. You want to make sure you have a firm that gives the clients breaks as their assets grow, like, the second $1 million, they only pay 0.75 or something like that, because it's not that much harder to manage a $2 million client than it is a $1 million client. Those are some of the things to look for. And then you need to talk to them and tell them what you believe and make sure your beliefs sync up with their beliefs. And I wish you well in the search. And if you have any other questions about it, please feel free to call. And remember, you can call us on Saturdays too at 855-935-TALK. That's 3 to 5 Eastern. And here's the last question for today.
Hi, Don. This is Jill from Idaho. I have a question about a non-retirement brokerage account. I have fully funded my retirement accounts, my 401k and my Roth IRA, every year, and I'm approaching a time where my CDs in just my savings account are maturing. I've been listening to you for the past year, and I'm becoming more brave to try opening a brokerage account. Can you explain how the tax implications of a non-retirement account work? Now I pay taxes on the interest of my CD every year. Would this be similar with my brokerage account? Thank you for any answers.
Well, the process is almost identical. Anything that generates interest, bonds, CDs, you can have CDs, by the way. I have CDs in my brokerage account. I have laddered CDs out over 5 years so that when one matures, I always just roll it right back out to 5. And so I get taxed on the income from those. I get taxed on income from bond funds. I get taxed on income from dividends in my equity ETFs. However, I don't get realized capital gains in my ETFs because they're ETFs and the way they're structured, you don't get those. However, if you had a mutual fund in your brokerage account, you could, in addition to having income tax, you could have realized capital gains, both short-term and long-term. And that's the big difference, is that in addition to paying taxes on the income generated by the securities, there can be capital gains, either internally within the funds themselves, or if you buy and sell securities, you will incur taxable events, whether it's a loss or a gain. And a lot of people manage their portfolios so that their losses, they take losses to offset some of their gains so they don't have to pay taxes. But generally speaking, if you use ETFs and bond funds or bond ETFs and stock ETFs, the bulk of what you will incur taxably is just the income tax on the income, on the dividends or the interest. Thank you so much for your question. Thank you all for your questions. I really enjoy them. And you can send them in to me at talkingrealmoney.com on the contact form. Just hit the contact button and you can speak them right there on your computer or your phone. Or you can type them up, then Tom gets them. Or you can call us on Saturdays between 3 and 5 Eastern Time at 855-935-TALK when we do our radio show on Northwest News Radio in Seattle. So there are so many ways to get in touch with us. Plus, you can even get help from one of our advisors, and that includes Tom, by just going to talkingrealmoney.com and clicking on Meet an Advisor. Now, I know that sounds like a sales pitch, doesn't it? It's not. And I assure you it's not, because it has not been one since we started doing the show in 2009. We don't believe in high pressure. We don't believe in pushing you to do anything, but we do believe that everybody deserves some help, even if you'll never become a client of our firm, Appella Wealth. That's okay, because, we found that people we help tend to recommend us to people who really need an advisor, so it ends up working out in the end. Thanks for being there. Take good care of yourselves. I'm Don McDonald, as always, talking real money.
The opinions and views expressed on this podcast were current on the date recorded. Opinions, estimates, forecasts, and statements of financial market trends that are based on current market conditions constitute our judgment and are subject to change without notice, including any forward-looking estimates or statements which are based on certain expectations and assumptions.
Although information and opinions given have been obtained from or based on sources believed to be reliable, no warranty or representation is made as to their correctness, completeness, or accuracy.
Information presented on the podcast is not personalized investment advice from Appella Wealth. The views and strategies described may not be suitable for everyone. This podcast does not identify all the risks, direct or indirect, or other considerations which might be material to you when entering any financial transaction. Past performance does not guarantee future results, and profitable results cannot be guaranteed. We hope you realize that the information provided on Talking Real Money is for informational, educational, and hopefully enjoyable purposes only. The podcast is not trying to get you to buy or sell any financial products or securities. Instead, the program is provided as a public service by Appella Wealth, a fee-only registered investment advisor.
Please see Appella Wealth's ADV Part 2A on our website for information regarding Appella's fees and services.
Appella Capital, LLC, DBA Appella Wealth, is an investment advisory firm registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. The firm only transacts business in the states where it is properly registered or excluded or exempt from registration requirements. Registration with the SEC or any state securities authority does not imply a certain level of skill or training. Appella does not provide tax or legal advice, and nothing either stated or implied here should be inferred as providing such advice. Thanks for listening, and please visit TalkingRealMoney.com for more information and important disclosure related to performance of any specific index or fund quoted in this podcast. I think I need a nap.